What up, fiction fam? Welcome to Down to Read. My name is Stephen, and this video is my review of Stephen King's post-apocalyptic dark fantasy novel, The Stand. The Stand was published in 1978 by Doubleday. Now, before we get into the usual book review fare, I think we need to go off on a little bit of a... Stephen King tangent! For the past 6 to 9 months, I've been consuming a lot of booktube content, which both inspired me to start reading again, and also start this channel. Something I've noticed from a lot of my favorite booktubers is that Stephen King is in their top 5 authors or top 10 authors, and when they have these top author lists, it's often brought up like, oh, and of course it's a given that Stephen King's on my list, like, psh, should I say more? And I'm sitting there saying, yes, please say more, because I haven't actually read any Stephen King books yet. Another popular video in this world of booktube seems to be tier lists, and particularly tier lists of Stephen King books. So it's safe to say that Stephen King is pretty well liked on here and by a lot of booktubers. And as I haven't read any of Stephen King's other work, I'm coming to this book review like he's any other author. Now, of course, I'm aware of how popular Stephen King is, and I've seen some movies based on Stephen King's work. In fact, The Shining,
Give me the bag,
and Shawshank Redemption would be my top 50 movies of all time pretty easily. But I've also seen some movies based on Stephen King's work that wasn't really for me, like It,
Don't you want a balloon?
The Dark Tower, and Pet Sematary. Yeah, not so much my thing. Now, I'm not writing off reading the books of these movies that I didn't like so much. I know It, Pet Sematary, and The Dark Tower are some of Stephen King's biggies in his catalog.
Biggies.
Well, except for maybe It. From what I know about the scene at the end of the book, which they sensibly didn't include in the movie, yeah, I don't think that's for me. So, if you know, you know. The point of this tangent was really just that I know Stephen King is very well loved here on BookTube and by the BookTube community, but for me, he's a fresh new author, having not read any of his previous work, so I'm going to be tackling this book review with an open mind. Anyway, let's end this Stephen King tangent. Alright, now let's get into the book review proper. First of all, I'm going to go over a summary of the book, spoiler free, then I'll go over the things I liked, the things that weren't for me, and finally we'll give it a rating out of 5 stars. If this book is a 5-star banger, we'll do a 5-star bonus wrap up. Let's get into it. A post-apocalyptic tale set in the United States of America, where a deadly and highly contagious virus referred to as Captain Trips has leaked from a government institution where it was being developed for biological warfare. This virus spreads quickly throughout the world, killing about 99% of the population. This book starts with how the virus got out of the government facility, and then follows people as they spread the virus, which cruelly sometimes leaves you hopeful that the people you're following are going to be okay, and then they cough. Among these stories of the virus spreading, we meet our extensive cast of characters. We follow these characters from before the virus, and as it's just starting to break out, and then after the virus is well and truly spread throughout the world. Which makes for some interesting character developments as people are trying to deal with this traumatic and terrible event. Some people it really changes, and some people not so much. Our surviving characters are left in this world without much direction and purpose, except for these dreams that they have that draw them towards these supernatural powers, one light and one dark. Interestingly though, as much as the settlements are built up and around these very contrasting powers, the people that live at the settlements sometimes are quite morally grey and don't necessarily fall into the box of being good or evil. Speaking of the people, let's delve into the extensive cast of characters that are in this book. The book is written in the third person, and in each chapter we follow a particular person or group of people at a certain location, and then the following chapter jump to another person from the cast, or another group of people from the cast of characters. I definitely found this book, there were some characters and groups of characters I preferred spending time with and reading about than others. And because I like to try and keep these reviews fairly tight, I'm not going to go over the extensive cast of characters that are in this book. It's actually quite impressive how many characters Stephen King's been able to write about in this one book. But for the purpose of this book review, I'm just going to go over my top 5 characters. And now this list might upset some of you, but this is my 5. Nick Andros, a deaf-mute 21-year-old drifter who was orphaned when he was quite young after the passing of his parents. While at the orphanage, he was bullied relentlessly, which made Nick quite resilient and resourceful. Early in the book, Nick is drifting through a town, and attacked by a gang. The sheriff of this town, misreading the situation, puts Nick in jail, but then finding out a little bit more about what's happened, actually helps Nick try to track down this gang and even deputizes Nick. Fran Goldsmith, who is a loving and generally good-natured person whose personalities are mirrored by her dad, but not so much her mother, who's quite cold and distant to Fran. Fran gets pregnant shortly before the virus starts to spread, which makes her journey even more interesting to me, and thankfully she has some support from the next character on my list, Harold Lauder. Harold is a 16-year-old boy who lives in the same town as Fran, and is described as being quite immature and unpopular. However, when the virus begins to spread, and the only two people left in the town are Fran and Harold, they form this really interesting bond as they begin to learn how to rely on each other. Harold's character arc for me was the most interesting of the book. I found him to be a really real type of person. The Trash Can Man.
Well, hi, gang. How you doing?
Safe to say the Trash Can Man's had a pretty sad childhood, which has driven him to be a schizophrenic pyromaniac. Although some of his actions are definitely on the bad side of things, I found him to be quite a complex character and was often rooting for the best for him.
Take a sentimental journey, a journey home.
Randall Flagg. From what I understand, this guy is a recurring character across the Stephen King multiverse, so maybe I'll get sick of him at some point. But as this is my first foray into the Stephen King multiverse, I found him to be pretty interesting. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's not a very complex character. He's very much pure evil. However, I found that in the chapters about Randall, he certainly has a commanding presence.
Stop it. Stop laughing at me!
Okay, that's probably about as much as I can say without spoiling too much of the book, so let's jump into the things I liked and the things that weren't for me. The beginning of the book, as she followed the spread of the virus from one person's cough to another person's cough, is very engaging and also pretty heartbreaking, as Stephen King makes it pretty clear that the virus doesn't discriminate. The character development arcs, as we see how people change or don't from the people who they were before the virus and after the virus. The contrast of how these characters develop after this significant event is also quite interesting. The setting. I didn't focus on it too much in my summary just now, but Stephen King does a really good job of setting a scene of this desolate wasteland or this desolate world that the characters now find themselves in. The length of this thing. I mean, this thing is thick, and I felt like not all the pages in this were 100% necessary. The ending in particular seems to drag for about 100 pages more than it needs to after the climactic event happens. In fact, I understand this version of The Stand is about 400 pages longer than the original edit was, and Stephen King recut it in the early 90s, and we have the version that we have today. Maybe I would have liked the editor's cut a bit better. Too many characters. I mean, with this extensive cast of characters, you're always going to have some characters you prefer spending time with than others. And I also felt like some of these characters' exits from the story were pretty lackluster, almost like Stephen King couldn't be bothered writing about them anymore. My favorite Stephen King book? The Stand. My least favorite Stephen King book? The Stand. I give The Stand 4 stars. Despite the length and the number of characters in this book, I found about 80% of the book to be really engaging and interesting to read. This being my first Stephen King book, I did like it. I just didn't maybe love it like some other booktubers do. However, I'm definitely not giving up on Stephen King and keen to check out more of his catalog at some point. If you've read it, let me know what you think in the comments. Or if you have another Stephen King book which is your favorite that you think I should read, please let me know too. Be sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more content like this one, subscribe. And until next time, thanks for watching. Zhoosh.